We are currently witnessing a completely stunning geopolitical shift playing out right in front of us. I mean, what started out as an intense U.S. maximum pressure campaign on Iran is unexpectedly transforming, mutating really, into a massive strategic opportunity for China. In this explainer, we're going to use the latest reports and statements to map out exactly how the balance of power is shifting, literally from the Middle East all the way to the Pacific.
To truly understand how this power balance is shifting, we've got to ask one absolutely critical question. Is Beijing actually stepping in to hold Iran's most sensitive assets? Because as Washington deals with the fallout of its own diplomacy, we're looking at a scenario where China might just be gaining the upper hand through backdoor diplomacy, cash, and nuclear leverage.
Now, before we get too deep into the weeds here, I want you to keep the NPT, that's the Non-Proliferation Treaty, in the back of your mind. Basically, this is the landmark international agreement aimed at stopping the spread of nuclear weapons. Iran's recent threat to potentially leave this treaty, well, that represents the ultimate high-stakes climax of this whole unfolding global puzzle. To untangle this complex web, here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First, the nuclear twist. Second, China's diplomatic chess move. Third, Pakistan the silent messenger. Fourth, Flashpoint Strait of Hormuz. And finally, the global stakes. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The nuclear twist. A stunning geopolitical shift.
All right, so according to reports from Al Arabiya based on unnamed sources, there's a wild development unfolding right now. Iran is reportedly ready to move its enriched uranium to China. Think about that for a second. Tehran is looking for firm guarantees from Beijing before moving ahead with any potential deal with Washington. What does that actually mean? It heavily suggests Tehran currently trusts China's backing and their long-term security guarantees way more than any promises coming out of the US. Now, while these claims haven't been officially confirmed by Iran, they open up some massive questions. Like, how far have these backdoor talks with China actually gone? And has Tehran just handed China one of his biggest strategic victories ever? Moving on to Section 2, China's diplomatic chess move, Beijing as the new guarantor. You know, there is a totally stark contrast in how the major players are handling this situation. Publicly, the United States is projecting total control. President Trump is out there stating talks are moving in an orderly and constructive manner and insisting time is on our side. So the US is really focused on that public-facing heavy lifting. Meanwhile, China's public stance, simply urging calm and a comprehensive ceasefire. But behind closed doors, reports are painting a very different reality. China is quietly shaping the terms, basically acting as the ultimate guarantor that Iran is actually waiting on.
On the record, though, China's foreign ministry spokesperson, Mao Ning, laid out a very clear position back on May 25th. Beijing is demanding a comprehensive and lasting ceasefire, insisting that the door to dialogue has to stay open so the region doesn't just slide back into total confrontation. Crucially, they're calling for the immediate reopening of shipping lanes in the Strait of Hormuz to safeguard global supply chains. And all of this, they state, is framed around upholding President Xi Jinping's solemn four-point proposal for peace and stability in the Middle East.
That brings us to Section 3, Pakistan, the silent messenger, the Iron Brothers' access.
Okay, this is where we see what is basically a bizarre, high-stakes game of geopolitical telephone. Since there are zero in-person meetings between the US and Iran right now, the exchange of messages is being entirely mediated by Pakistan. So it works like this. The US sends a message to Pakistan, Pakistan carries that message to Tehran, and then for the final step, Tehran turns right around and looks to Beijing for the actual security guarantees. It's a fascinating, almost unbelievable geopolitical triangle. And the ties facilitating this setup are incredibly deep. President Xi Jinping actually hosted Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif in Beijing on May 25th, calling him an old friend and describing their bond as unbreakable. Keep in mind, Pakistan is one of the very few states China actually labels an all-weather strategic partner. Sharif responded by calling them two Iron Brother countries. Plus, Pakistan's Army Chief Asim Munir, who just got back from talks in Tehran, was also present in Beijing. So what we're seeing is this incredibly tight Iron Brother axis emerging right around this crisis, with Islamabad acting as the vital bridge, totally embedded in Beijing's regional strategy. But despite all this mediation, there's a massive disconnect in expectations. While the US is projecting confidence, again, stating that talks are orderly and time is on their side, Iran is explicitly cautioning that no agreement is imminent. Tehran claims their focus right now is purely on ending the war, not on the details of the nuclear issue. So that means the absolute most sensitive questions, like highly contested uranium stockpiles and possible transfers to China, are still just completely hanging in the balance. Section 4. Flashpoint, Strait of Hormuz, the choke point.
This is where the actual physical confrontation is happening, and Iran has laid out a very specific official stance on their actions at the strait. First off, they strongly deny trying to charge any tolls to ships passing through. Second, they claim managing the strait is their legal right and that closing it is solely a defensive measure to prevent the military invasion and stop insecurity in the Persian Gulf. They insist that, for free trade, the strait remains open. Finally, regarding Europe's new sanctions on Iran for blocking traffic, Tehran is promising a reciprocal response. They're basically saying you can't unilaterally impose illegal measures and expect them to stand idly by. They frame their control over the strait as a historic correction of regional power imbalances.
And this next point strips away any ambiguity. One Iranian official explicitly stated, "If you continue the war, we'll make the American people miserable and the American economy miserable." I mean, wow. This isn't just a military threat, this is direct, intense, strategic posturing aimed squarely at the U.S. economy. They are openly telling Washington that they have the means to inflict severe financial pain.
And it goes even further than that. A senior advisor close to Mojtaba Khamenei issued this really stark warning. We may withdraw from the treaty on the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. Do you know what this threat means? He warned that if U.S. forces decide to attack the strait and enter the Persian Gulf, Iran won't just deliver a painful response and break the naval siege, they might trigger a massive nuclear escalation by quitting the NPT entirely. This is huge because it openly links conventional military moves at a global choke point directly to nuclear proliferation.
Which brings us to Section 5, the global stakes, from the Gulf to the Pacific. Let's start here with a little bit of cautious optimism. 30. According to Tasnim News, if diplomacy somehow prevails and both sides actually choose to engage, a negotiated U.S.-Iran agreement could restore normal shipping traffic through the Strait of Hormuz in just 30 days. So that means the commercial disruption crippling the region right now could be eased incredibly quickly, provided a political solution is reached.
And that restoration is absolutely critical. Why? Because the Strait of Hormuz is a vital artery for global energy flows and supply chains. A disruption at this single, narrow choke point doesn't just stay in the Middle East. It immediately impacts the entire global economy. It directly affects the cost of manufacturing, the cost of shipping, and ultimately the price of goods hitting your wallet. This is exactly why China is pushing so hard to reopen the lanes. Their own supply chains totally depend on it.
Which brings us to a final, lingering question we all need to be thinking about. If Beijing successfully uses this crisis to become the primary guarantor of security and nuclear leverage in the Gulf, who secures the Pacific? As Taiwan watches nervously to see what a U.S. setback in the Middle East means for its own future, we're left to wonder, has the U.S. maximum pressure campaign inadvertently handed China the exact leverage it needs to reshape the entire global chessboard? That is the geopolitical twist we absolutely all need to be paying attention to.